Well, let's discuss these latest developments now with Ori Goldberg, who's an Israeli political commentator joining us from Tel Aviv. And in London, we have Chris Doyle, a commentator on Middle East affairs and director of the Council for British Arab Understanding. Thank you both for being with us. Chris, let me start with you and pick up on what Hakan Fidan, the Turkish foreign minister, was saying there. A very complicated relationship, we know, between Turkey and Israel, to say the least. Israel has refused, we know, to entertain this idea of having Turkish troops as part of the International Stabilization Force for Gaza, which is meant to happen in phase 2 of the Trump peace plan. What leverage do you think Arab countries and Muslim countries have right now, including Turkey, to enforce this peace plan ahead of their meeting tomorrow in Istanbul?
The leverage that Turkey and other regional actors have and wider Muslim powers is with the Trump administration, because President Trump has wedded himself to this ceasefire plan. He wants to see quite clearly it's succeeding. And in order to do that, he needs an international stabilization force that will have a lot of forces from these countries, and he needs massive amounts of funding, billions of dollars, for the reconstruction of Gaza. So I think, considering that the United States isn't going to fund this, it needs funding from the Gulf, from other rich donor states. That's the leverage they have. They can say collectively, if they have a united approach, we want to do this, but there are certain things that need to change. There needs to be a much clearer trajectory as to where this is all going. Palestinian state, end of occupation, and an Israeli withdrawal. That's where their leverage is.
Ori, your thoughts. If, as Chris says, the U.S. relies on Turkish and Qatari participation for this regional stabilization force, can Israel realistically veto those actors without damaging its relationship with Washington?
No, I don't think Israel can veto President Trump's plan. I think Israel will have to accept both Qatari and Turkish participation in the International Stabilization Force. I think if there is one positive development that I can attest to regarding the situation in Gaza, there are nearly none of them, but if there's one positive development, it's this growing, or rather this continuous decrease in Israel's authority on the ground and vis-a-vis its emerging international partners. Israel can and does kill and destroy. That, unfortunately, and horribly, is the status quo, and it is very hard to disrupt a militant status quo once in place. But that's the only thing Israel can do. Israel has no vision. Israel cannot shape the future of Gaza, and Israel's authority is, as I said, decreasing daily. So that's certainly something that I expect will happen exactly as Chris says.
Chris, do you agree with that? Ori says that Israel has no vision for Gaza. Do you think there's a clear vision from the Netanyahu government of what Gaza should look like the day after the war?
Not at all, because it depends on which particular segment of the Netanyahu coalition you speak to. There are those, on the extremes who would prefer to annex it, to kick the Palestinian population out of Gaza. There are others who are less wedded to that view. So there isn't a united vision. To be honest, I think that also Netanyahu himself is probably most concerned about political survival. And to do that, he needs to look as if he's won in Gaza. And to an extent, I think that's almost his objective. He wants to be able to demonstrate to his base, to the international community, that what he's done has been worth it. He's defeated Hamas. The trouble is, that's not going to work. So Ori is absolutely right. There's no Israeli vision to this. I think a bigger question is, what is the Trump vision as well? Does he really see Gaza as part of state Palestine?
And what about Arab nations who are meeting today? Some of them have said that they're not really on board with the full 20-point plan that Donald Trump presented. Are there going to be amendments to this plan, do you think? And how, if that's the case, how do they convince Trump that they need to amend this plan?
Well, I think that actually the Trump administration has shown a degree of flexibility. They haven't been wedded to the script of those 20 points in the way that perhaps Netanyahu would have liked. So I think there is some room, because of the vagueness of it, because it lacked detail, to actually put some flesh on the bones and make this clear. For example, what will be the terms of reference and mandate for such a stabilization force? So all of this can be worked out, and it can be shifted to something that's more workable, albeit from a very shaky start.
Ori, your thoughts about where we're headed next? I mean, we're still in phase one, phase two. We have no indication yet as when that is supposed to begin. And that would include, of course, Hamas laying down its arms, which we're not sure where the group is going to do, whether they're going to be doing that or not. What do you think it's going to take us from phase one into phase two now?
To take my cue directly from Chris's words, I think the Arab countries that will be meeting in Istanbul are still giddy with the understanding that they have President Trump's ear, whereas Israel does not. This is a sea change. It's impossible to exaggerate how dramatic this is, even though it isn't being realized or manifested on the ground in such dramatic terms. So I think once they come to terms with it, once they are able to present an orderly vision, I think the Trump administration would welcome their vision, because the Trump administration doesn't really have a vision of its own that is particularly clear. The Trump administration wants a deal. If Arab countries, if the Gulf monarchies, if Turkey are able to propose a deal, one that would, for example, include the decommissioning of Hamas rather than the absolute disarmament till the last rifle, I believe we will find more readiness in the Trump administration. It will be more amenable to such a proposal.
But what about Netanyahu? I mean, that has been a red line for him. How does Trump convince Netanyahu to accept that?
Netanyahu has crossed just about as many red lines as he's drawn in the sand. Netanyahu is receding now. Israel only wants to deal with its domestic squabbles. For example, the drafting of the ultra-Orthodox and what the next election will look like. That is very much in line with the unarticulated yet very clear Israeli understanding that as far as Israel is concerned, Gaza is over.
Thank you both for bringing us your views there from London and from Tel Aviv on these latest developments with the Gaza ceasefire. Chris Doyle, Ori Goldberg, thank you for joining us on the Al Jazeera News Hour.
Thank you for having me.